I never do this anymore, so bear with me. Where's one? Okay, there we go. Hold on. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. Since I was up on the other one, I had all of this stuff opened. Glad we've got folks joining on. Welcome, everyone. Melissa, thanks for joining. All right, let's see if y'all can see this. Mm. Let me know if the agenda is about to come up. Do you guys see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So,
Yes.
being recorded February 2025. Rod is in Antarctica, so it'll be great when he comes back. We can talk to him all about it. I think he's on LinkedIn and posting some things there, so feel free. I'm sure he's having a great time. Maybe we can do a show and tell when he comes back with his little adventure. So I'm gonna run this while he's out. And I think we could go right into public comment and then quick report updates. I think everybody who's on here, I'm familiar with. I'm looking to see if there's anyone on here who may not have sent any agenda items or are not on the agenda. Is there anything that anybody wants to bring up that we aren't about to cover over here in regular updates or the couple of new items that we have here? All right. Well, hearing none, we'll kind of move on. I am waiting for the folks from the city with the noise ordinance. They're, planning to come around 7, so we might end up having to wait for them. And we can bounce around if we need to, and actually we probably will. All right. So Melissa, I'm going to hand it to you. Why don't you do your updates and also the fact that you guys are not going to be doing land use updates anymore. So please tell us why.
No, I mean, I'm always happy to share some slides when I come to Sunny, but for the most part, the councilwoman feels that she feels, between our newsletter and the RNO visits that we do, that there really wasn't need for another avenue. So
All right.
I'm trying to share, but oh, here we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So you'll always be able to share your updates, just the land use newsletter that you guys were putting out for anybody who wanted to sign up. That's no longer being done.
Right. Happy to share a few slides with you when I come.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Thank you.
So the proposed noise ordinance is on your agenda tonight. There's little information on that. It wasn't the Safety, Housing,
Do I need
Education, and
to
Homeless
stop
Committee.
sharing? Melissa, I don't see, are you
Oh,
sharing something yet?
it shows on my side, Sharon. Hold on a second. Let
Does
me cancel that and
anybody?
try again.
There we
It's
go.
showing sharing.
Now I see it. I didn't see it
Wait.
before. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
There we go.
I've been having Zoom issues, so I apologize. It's probably city technology. Um, so All right, so yes, here's some information on the noise ordinance. One of the big things that we think people are most interested in is the expanded waste collection hours. So previously they couldn't collect before 7 a.m. Now they will be able to do it at 6 a.m. Realistically, some waste haulers are still picking up at 4 a.m. So they're still going to be out of compliance. But that is of great interest to a lot of people. They've also changed the snow removal equipment operating hours, but they bumped that up to give people a little relief. It was 5 a.m. Now they're pushing it to 7 a.m. There's a few more things on here, including adding language for requiring mufflers on motorcycles manufactured on or before December 31st, 1982.
Yeah,
That
that
was
was an
not
interesting
previously.
one. What's the compliance going to be like, and who's actually doing compliance on such a thing?
Excellent question. Uh, well, we in theory hope that Public health and environment will do that. Um, the reality is this is a complaint-based system, so they're not going to be out there pulling motorcycles over on the side of the road or anything of the sort.
So if your
This will
neighbor's
be
one of
if
these
you're
folks, if your neighbor's one of these people, you now will be able to have a ordinance that would allow you to complain about them. Obviously, someone who's just driving by, you're not going to really be able to capture. Is that the thought?
that's exactly it.
Okay.
So realistically, ideally, you know where that person lives and or works. You know, they constantly park in front of your house to, go to work every day. Something like that, where there is a consistent place that that vehicle is at that you can then report it. And the Department of Health and Environment, Public Health and Environment, can then send out an inspector when their schedule allows, knowing that on, every Monday through Friday or just every Thursday between this time and this time, that car is typically there, or that vehicle. Um, Previously, there was a specific table in the noise ordinance for motor vehicles, and this removes that and kind of tucks it into the general noise ordinance laws. But realistically, what it comes down to is that motor vehicles must have modified equipment. So think modified exhaust and other things to be exceeding those sound levels. And again, ideally, you know where they are on a regular basis to be able to report that. So that's just a few things in there. And then another one that somewhat applies to Sunnyside is if you have a residence that existed before a commercial or an industrial use, then they must comply with a certain level, a certain lower noise level. But if you move in next to or build a house near a commercial space or a industrial space, they have higher noise levels because more or less you moved in next to them.
So, okay, so on the, and I, the, is the high, what is the higher level versus the lower level in the resident before commercial? Is that the 85/80, 50
Let me see
55?
if I
Is
have
it
that up.
very different? I mean, we
Hold on
definitely
one
do have
second
this issue
here.
and have the issue with Monkey Barrel, frankly.
Monkey barrels isn't necessarily a good example because monkey barrel, well,
No, we had meaning not now, but this same exact situation occurred a few years ago when the business was already there, but a couple of duplexes went up and it was the folks in the duplex, that particular one. There was another one where the resident was there before. So that's an interesting one. Yeah, how would something like that?
it's always existed. This is
Right.
just tweaking that slightly.
Okay.
I am all right. So basically, it increased the daytime allowable limits um, emitted by industrial that were in existence prior to the residential property from
Hmm.
80 or to 80 decibels from 65.
Ah,
Increased the nighttime emitted by industrial from 65 to 75, and then let's see, that accidentally got copied twice.
all right. So it's
So I'm
not
going to have to check the
commercial.
other one. So I believe the commercial, I think that's an error. We have some notes on this. I
Okay.
think that's
So
an
like
error,
not
but it goes
commercial as in
65 to
a.
75.
Right.
Pardon me?
So when we talk about the industrial commercial, and you said Monkey Barrel wasn't an example because it's more focused towards truly industrial, like a machine shop versus a restaurant bar, or does commercial and industrial in this mean the same thing?
No, they're definitely two different things, commercial and industrial, and they both have those limits.
Okay.
I keep I have a document that I created on the side, but it's got an error in it. So I'm going to have to consult the code, but I can put that in the chat when I have it up.
Okay.
The reality is that that had to exist before the construction of the residential property. So it had to be in existence prior to the subject residential property. So it's not just I moved next door, it's I built a home next door.
So,
Does that make sense?
I do have an example, and David, I'm sorry, this is actually your property, and the only
Oh, I
reason
don't
is
know.
because,
I was actually noodling about this based on the age of
okay, so
all the
so
properties, both residential and the Subaru. But go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, and so jump in if I had a question just about your property. So that happened to be an exception and an automotive garage for an X number of years. Then there was a new ownership with the continuing of the same use. What happens in a situation like that? Does it rely on how far back the exception and the continuation of that exception is not something new? So David's property, that is the situation, right? I don't know how many years it's been there, but regardless, the question is what happens when you have different owners and if the use changes slightly, but currently, I don't even know what it's called, David. Is it called
Well, it's
industrial? Is it called commercial?
no, it's a not. So it's a non. So it's a strange property because it's zone residential, but it's always been a. It was zone residential when people weren't thinking clearly because it's always been a commercial use property. So it's had a single non-conforming use, which is heavy automotive paint, which covered the when the alternator shop was there, the repair facility. So I believe it's been that that non-conforming allowable use has been since the late 40s. And in one way or another, it's operated as a commercial property since construction.
So yeah, I'd like to understand about that particular property if complaints come up and maybe they have or they were different, but really curious because it's these type of situations. Like I'd like to make sure I interpret this ordinance correctly. So let's just look at David's property if we can and use it as an example. If somebody was to complain about noise today, what would happen?
Fair. I think, especially if you have DDPHE coming, I'll let them speak to that more
Okay.
specifically. But as you can see here, so it shows the source premises, residential, commercial, industrial, public, and then some of those changes, right? So moving from 65 to 80 for industrial, 60 to 65 for commercial during the day, and then at night, commercial does not change, but industrial does move up from 65 to 75.
Okay.
Or, yeah, 65 to 75. So I'll let them speak more specifically on that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they were coming for actually that makes sense. We'll bring this up as an example to just look at. And Melissa, when you have that document, that particular one that you're looking at, once you get
Yeah.
anything corrected, it'd be great
Oh,
if there's
that's an
anything that
internal thing that I created for the councilwoman. So it's just a
okay.
comparison.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not really meant for sharing, but
Okay. Yeah, and that's
all it
fair.
is just, me going through and
Oh, I
giving her
got you.
notes.
No, and I thought it was
So
something. I'll ask DDPHE folks, like if they have these type of documents that can be just housed, and we could wait for the draft, and then we can wait for what was approved. But it'd be great for people to be able to look at it like this, side by side. It's much easier to interpret than going through a lot of words.
yeah, they did create a summary of changes. We
Hmm.
didn't find it to be as robust as we were preferring.
Right. Okay.
So there is this document that does exist. It's available to the public
Okay.
that kind of details some of that information, but it's not comprehensive.
Great.
So,
No, thank
so
you.
Trupti, the interesting question would be, is it determined based on construction? Is it determined based on ownership, or is it determined based on occupancy? Which I don't really understand from the conversation we're having. What's the who has the prevailing right?
All right, so for any industrial, commercial, or public premises causing the unbracketed levels to be exceeded at a residential receptor premise when such industrial, commercial, or public premise and their emitted sound pressure levels were in existence prior to the existence of the receptor, or residential receptor.
So it's the
So
building
basically,
construction, or is that what it would be, Melissa?
basically they're saying the use, and I'll let them be more specific in it.
And
So,
actually, they are on the call now. So we've got Brendan
okay,
Doyle and Paul
excellent.
Rydzel, and I apologize if I
Oh,
butchered it.
Paul
And
Rediesel.
Riesel, thank you. We're happening, guys. We're going through an update from Councilwoman's office, and this is one of the things. But we also have you, and the specific questions are coming up around a property we have, and the owner of that property is online here, David Heller, and I guess we're just looking for some clarification about this particular property and this ordinance and its interpretation. So, David, if you want to, if in case they just joined and didn't hear some of this, if you want to just share with them the property and give us a little snippet of the summary, and then ask them the question that that you're looking for clarity on.
Well, I was just, I'm not really sure I was looking, Trupti. I was just, I was just
Well,
participating with your question because it's an interesting question. But
okay, so
yeah, yeah.
we've got a property, and this is where, I don't want to misstate it, but the zoning was residential, but the use has always been, or for a very long time, been industrial automotive through an exception. And it's changed ownership. And this we have David, who's a current owner, and he's gone through two different occupants in that too. So two different tenants. So we're trying to understand for the new noise laws for industrial, commercial, how
Mhm.
does something like this in that location, how do we interpret this? Will this fall under commercial and industrial?
So we're going to still look at both properties the same way we do currently. So, in other words, the first thing we'll look at is are both properties allowed usages in the zoned area? And then if let's say just we'll cover both scenarios. So let's say the garage or the automotive place is not an allowed usage for that zoned area, then we don't really consider it. It's going to have to abide by um, whatever it's next to for the most part. Now, excuse me. If David, when was your house built?
So
It's
it's not a house. It's a garage. It is an
he's
Oh,
the
automotive
owner of the
you're the
commercial
owner.
facility.
property.
So you're the owner of the garage.
Yes.
Yeah, and it
Okay,
does have
gotcha.
it does have a recorded non it's zone residential, which no one can quite figure out in the city how that happened, but it's got an allowable use. It has a non-conforming use recorded for heavy automotive and paint, auto
So
repair paint going back to the late 40s, I believe.
so we would just look at that as it. Gosh, sorry. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Melissa.
So we would just literally look at when if it started as a garage from the day it was built, then we would be looking, and it's an allowed usage. We
Yeah.
would just be looking at when your building was built and when the surrounding homes were built or rebuilt, as long as the usage of their property hadn't changed. In other words, if there was a house that was there in 1880, we're going to consider that when that usage started. Now, if the house was built in the 50s, that's when the first house that was residential, then we're going to look at that as in the 1950s. Did does that answer the question
So I
or
believe what you're saying is it's based on construction, the construction of a specific building, whether it be residential or
it's
commercial. It's first the first point of contact is going to be which was built first. Is that accurate?
we're going to look actually at the usage and the building date because sometimes just I think I heard somebody saying, or we run into situations where maybe the property was residential and it is still a home, but they've converted it to a bar or something like that, and it's an allowed usage and everything because they went through all the proper permitting. But now you've had a change of usage for the property itself. And so, if that house had been built prior to the home next to it, but now the bar, the change, a complete change in its usage, and that let's say the building was built in 1950, the neighbor was came in and first built in 1955. They're both residential, but then the bar is built in 196 or the change of usage was 1965. Well, that house then in uh, the neighboring house that was built maybe 5 years later in the structure but has remained residential. Now that noise level is going to have to be residential. So if your property tomorrow you sold it and they changed it from an automotive shop to a flower shop,
They can,
then
but they can't. Yeah.
right, but then it would
No, I
lose.
wish they. I actually wish we could, but it has one allowable use. But the building was built in 1948, and that's
Mhm.
when the use was applied
Right.
to the property.
So in your case, we'd be looking at it just in general at
Okay.
1948.
So if the house next door was built in 1936, but it's been a singular allowable use since 1948, how would that then rule on the auto repair facility?
The same way it is now, you're going to have to meet the residential noise levels.
The residential noise levels.
Yeah.
Okay, if the home was
Because,
built before.
Okay.
yeah, because we look at whoever is complaining about the noise. And so then whatever that property is, that's going to dictate what the noise level is. And that's when we get into looking at what pre-existed. We look at an allowed use when the structure was built and what and then the neighboring property.
But if
Same thing.
but if the neighboring property was built after 1948, then the shop would prevail. Is that correct?
Correct.
Got
Then
it.
then
Okay.
it's going to go, and then the shop is going to probably be, well, in fact, I'm sure the shop would be considered commercial. Industrial, you have to actually manufacture and make something.
Yeah, no, it's commercial. It's
Yeah.
commercial. Yeah.
So in your case, what happens is the current quote unquote grandfather number is 60 day and night. So what would happen in your case is you would have 65 during the day and 60 at night.
Got it. Okay. That's great to know.
That I'm glad you were on here, David, so we could pick on your example because
Oh,
this is
it's
an interesting one because
yeah.
any business next to residential all throughout our neighborhood and obviously every other neighborhood can run into this weird a situation where people don't know what the proper application might be. And I guess I have one more clarifying question on that.
Mhm.
If that, like, let's assume the house next to David's commercial, the garage is torn down and rebuilt. Is that a new date now, or does it go
No,
back to the existing date as long as the use was continued to be the same? Okay, okay,
correct.
got it. Because
Now,
I
if it had
think
been
I'm gonna need to
vacant,
write this down and interpret it. So, because I think this could come up and I want to make sure our other businesses kind of know where they stand on these situations.
and in all honesty, what happens 9 out of 10 times is that residential moves in next to the business because just because residential has the lowest noise levels associated with it. So if the house is pre-existing, then it's the residential noise level. But so it's and a business comes in, that business just has to maintain, what it would normally with regards to being next to a residential home. What's happened or what tends to happen is that let's say, well, up in even further north, kind of in more of the industrial area, somebody sells their big business or their big industrial building, and then the developer comes in, tears it down, and builds a bunch of apartments or condos right next to these other industrial businesses. And if they all of a sudden have to change their noise levels to a much lower level than what they've been using, you can look at a ton of money for mitigation, trying to change equipment, et cetera. And we don't want to run somebody who's been there forever out of town. But we aren't going to grant them anything more than they already had, if they're a commercial or if they're an industrial or what have you.
All right. Well, thank you. And we are going to come back to you when we get to your topic. So, Melissa, I'll let you go back and finish up unless somebody has other questions on
Well,
this
we
particular
can,
thread.
yeah, we can wait until you're done. I'm sorry, I thought you were ready
No,
for
we
us,
were,
so
no,
I'm just going to turn off.
we needed you to clarify because we came into very specific questions that Melissa was going to defer to you guys anyway.
Okay, I'll disappear for a while.
Thank you.
All right, we just have a reminder about the near Northwest area plan rezoning. This will be postponed, or it has been postponed, and so it will be actually on March 17th instead of March 10th. That said, we encourage people to see what we're doing, which is basically moving some of the properties that were in former Chapter 59, so Denver's old code, and bringing them into the current Denver zoning code. And then we are zoning select areas for DO8, which is that active centers and corridors, to kind of encourage a pedestrian-friendly, ideally retail environment over time. But this will require redevelopment. So this is kind of part of the 20-year plan that this near Northwest area plan envisions. So we are excited about that.
I want to point out that Sunnyside has given a letter of support for this because, for the last couple of years, as we've been talking about some of the changes that they're making specifically for us, was that 44th Avenue. I want to make sure that we let them know that the community was meeting about this outside of NPI, and they also, made sure it got into NPI. Therefore, we provide a letter of support for the changes that are being made with especially the DO8.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and then as a reminder, we did pass the Advancing Equity and Rezoning project. So this is basically trying to improve our zoning process to make it, one, get rid of some of the inherent racism in its language, and two, try and improve our notifications. Previously, we were only notifying property owners of rezonings, and that could really that impact residents that are the renters, and they had no clue. So this is going to be notifying both property owners and tenants of all rezonings. So we're really excited about that. So if you have questions or want to look into that further, there is that link. We have the proposed regulations for new gas stations. So this will be not on the 18th, or on Monday, it's Tuesday, February 18th is the answer, because of the holiday, but this will be at council on Tuesday. And basically it is proposal that would prohibit new gas stations within a quarter mile of existing gas stations, within a quarter mile of light rail or heavy rail transit stations, and within 300 feet of low density residential zone districts like the single unit SU and the 2-unit TU zone districts. So this is in some ways retroactive. So it does apply to all projects that submitted an application prior or post May 13th, 2024. That date was chosen because that is when they brought this proposal forward to the Budget and Policy Committee. And they noticed that there was a flood of applications immediately after, and they felt that that did not meet the intent of what they were trying to do. So that will be at council on Tuesday after the holiday. So there is some information on that, and if you'd like to speak, how to do so. We have modernizing parking requirements. So this is a big one in theory, but in practice really doesn't impact a lot of Sunnyside. As a reminder, we already don't require parking minimums for single unit, 2-unit. So, especially for Sunnyside, which is predominantly single unit and 2-unit zoning, this sounds a lot worse than it is. But this
however, over on by light rail and along
yes.
Inca and Jason, this is where it will have the biggest impact. And we know Zia all by itself created enough complaints. If we have 5 more Zias, I think there will be an issue. And I think this is this already happening? And there is
it is.
Okay, so this one is
we are doing this
debatable.
It is not. It is to come into compliance with state regulations. So this was passed by the state last year, and we have until June 30th, 2025 to come into compliance.
Okay.
So this is an attempt to come into compliance with that. But yes, so just as a reminder, just because there is not parking minimums does not mean that no parking would be provided. Often lenders require it. Often even the market demands it.
Right.
But it's likely that it would be less parking overall.
I see a question.
So there is some.
Lexi?
Hey, thanks, Tripti. Melissa, just kind of following up on our meeting with Honey on Tuesday. So when we were kind of like, obviously there's like a portion of this that is required for the state law.
Yes.
By June 30th. So
yes.
The like overarching just getting rid of parking minimums across the city, we kind of are like, hey, is there a way to do this in 2 phases? And I don't think we really circled back up at the end as to like if that was even realistic or not. But is that something where it's like, instead of just shoving this whole, like, let's get rid of all parking minimums everywhere, requirements everywhere, can we do, is that a possibility that you are aware of at all, to be like, let's do this in two phases where we meet what is required by this law by June 30th, and then we look at everything else that's outside of this purview at a later date?
I'm not aware of that right now, but then again, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
Realistically, they are a little slow in coming out because I think that they believe that this may not be a popular proposal. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of choices on this.
Okay.
So,
is there any way to provide that feedback? I don't know, just sharing truth. What kind of Honey was just saying, like, hey, let's come into compliance with what is specifically required, which is not getting rid of it everywhere. But then, like, let's actually stop and think about how this could affect things in different pockets of our neighborhoods. And I don't know. Anyway, that was just something I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I had mentioned that to the councilwoman, so she is aware of that. I think that we're waiting for a little more information from them. I had reached out to them earlier this month, and they're still not ready to create a public meeting, so they're working on it.
Yeah, so it feels very unrealistic given how quickly that is. But anyway.
Yeah, okay. I think that they're really kicking this can to the last minute. So, yeah. But yes, it's something that I definitely discussed with the councilwoman, so she is aware of that. We're just not sure what that path would be right now.
Okay, but just to be clear, Trupti, and anybody else who's not as aware, the requirement by June 30th is not getting rid of everything. Like, there's a specific, this legislation is just partially related to certain areas. And then I think Denver was like, right? Let's just get rid of everything. And so I think, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I think it feels from at least us and Honey, like, it just feels like a lot. And I think it's just like you said, over by the railroad, that's definitely going to become relevant. But that, I think, is affected.
But I was going to say, yeah, the TOD piece is affected. It would really be looking at, for me, like for us in Sunnyside, specifically any projects that could come up where this wouldn't, hit, but maybe it would be something that people would consider. So, Lexi, maybe, you and I can just have a, offline conversation to, talk about how Honey is kind of worried about this and whether there are any parts where Sunny could get impacted, because we didn't blow up like Honey did, and where we are blowing up, it's near light rail. So there's a little difference there. But yeah, I want to make sure if there are areas we should be concerned about, that we make sure that we, everybody's on, is aware. Thank you.
I want to be clear. It's not just light rail or transit stops. It is just regular buses. And I believe that it's like they only have to come once every, I think, 30 minutes. I'll have to go back and look.
Oh, that's a good one.
So,
30 minutes.
Okay. But that pretty much covers a very, very large swath of Northwest Denver.
Yeah.
With the exception of over by Sloan's Lake a little bit. So, I think that this applies pretty broadly, especially to the areas.
Okay.
So, but, it's something that I'm sure that we will have more conversations with them as this continues to move forward.
Lexi, I think they're just on next month's agenda too, after maybe looking through and maybe understanding it. I personally have not spent a lot of time on this other than knowing it was coming. So good reminder for me to get familiar with this.
Yeah, let's grab coffee or something.
Yeah, thanks. Sounds good.
All right, we have the Sheridan Corridor Safety Study, which doesn't really as much apply to Sunny, but I'm sure you've driven it and realize what a mess it is. So they are looking predominantly at safety and improving that aspect alone. So not necessarily at transit, but solely on safety, and improving that all the way from Hampton to I-76. So they have just begun that kickoff project. They've asked, there's some asking for some feedback on different issues ranging from narrow sidewalks to unsafe crossings. And they'd love that input from anyone that's willing to take their survey.
Okay, I'm going to write that down to share it out.
And then lastly, we have the Resilient Landscape Regulatory Update.
Ooh.
So this is just the state of Colorado approved Senate Bill 24-005 last year, which prohibits new non-functional turf and artificial turf for new non-residential developments beginning in January 2026. So this is kind of following that and trying to take it a little bit of a step further. So that's just going to be focusing on landscaping requirements for new developments and some redevelopments. They're not coming from for your yard anytime soon here. So there's some information on that.
Okay, wonderful.
Otherwise, for Sunnyside, just again, the federal bus rapid transit. That said, this is definitely a project that is in jeopardy under the current administration. Its funding is very uncertain, incredibly uncertain. And as such, it was scheduled to be talked about at committee next Tuesday at the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee. We are waiting to see the agenda for that. We are unsure if that's going to happen or if this is the item, which is basically $2.5 million and an intergovernmental agreement with CDOT will come up, because I think the city is very hesitant and is very concerned about putting money towards something that may or may not happen with federal funding. So we are watching that closely. And that is what I have.
Thanks. Anybody have any questions? I know we're a little bit over, but I think we'll still have time for the other two topics. Anybody have questions on stuff Melissa's gone over? All right, I'm not seeing any. Speak up if there is. Okay, and I think we've got the noise ordinance on next. So Paul and Brendan, if you want to, I don't know if you want to pull up the website, you guys will be able to share anything you want to, but just want to make sure kind of we're all clear, like the residents kind of know what their, rights are, businesses, and, we really talked about this whole commercial and this grandfathering and who was there first. Definitely something that I think our group will need to take some notes on. I'll run it through you guys before I share it with some of our businesses. So if they come across something like this, they know how to interpret that. But if you can share with us kind of the major changes that will impact, especially a neighborhood like ours, where predominantly, we have more of a residential with commercial kind of embedded. We've got some parks. Obviously, we have a fair, and I know this changes some of the public spaces. So if you want to talk about just why we're discussing this now, and then also the issue of who do people call when there's a problem? Is this like a non-emergency call the cops and they log the complaint? Making sure people know where to log the complaint. And also in this recording, because this is being recorded, we'll share it, is also like how to measure it. If I'm a resident next to a business, there are very specific rules around how many feet away from my door from this business. If you can just cover some of those things so that we kind of have it on record so that when people look at it, they kind of know and understand the ordinance and both parties' responsibility so that,
Sure.
no frivolous complaints without understanding the ordinance.
Yeah, fair enough, Paul. I can start and we can kind of tag team it. But just to introduce myself, my name's Brendan Doyle. I obviously work at the Department of Public Health and Environment alongside Paul. We're two members of the noise program team there. There was a lot of questions there, but I can start with if anybody has a noise complaint, they should dial 311 and it will get routed to our team. We have a small team. We're only 2.5 people that cover the entire city.
Well,
But that's where everybody should start calling 311 because that will be an official complaint to the city. We can move on it. We can take action. However, we need to rectify the situation. That alerts our investigator for that particular district that somebody has a complaint and they can start to work on it.
so I'm going to throw
That's
in
number one.
something because this kind of happens. These kind of complaints happen late at night, So
Yep.
someone's like, hey, it's after 10 and it's noisy or the
Yep.
business is loud. They make the complaint, it's kind of like fireworks. After they're over, you don't know who set them off or if it was even real. So when people do this 311 of a noise thing that occurred, how do you prove it and how do you move from there? And again, should people take recordings? People should do decibel readings off of an app. what do they provide you so that, you have some proof? Otherwise, how do you
Yeah,
move forward on
it's a
stuff like
it's
that?
a fair question, and to the point of our small team, obviously we don't work around the clock, so we can't always be at a place when an alleged violation is happening. A lot of times, what our investigators will do is, like, if it's a recurring problem, they'll be in touch with the complainant, um, give them their field cell number. It's like, hey, if this happens, if this is an ongoing thing on the weekends, for example, a bar is too loud or whatever, with amplified music, text me. We'll make an arrangement. I'll keep myself on call for
Okay.
that night to be able to go out and take readings. To your point about video evidence, there's a couple of one right now. People can take audio and video recordings of waste stream collection that is happening outside of allowable times. They can send it in to us as part of a complaint, and our investigators will check the metadata on that video and audio and make sure it aligns with what the complainant is saying. Like, this happened at 4:52 in the morning. Well, we need to see clear evidence that that truck was actually at that location at that time, and then we can pursue an enforcement case with them. That's one of the proposals that is potentially being changed in this round of revisions. Right now, waste stream collection is just prohibited from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. The proposal is to move back that time from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So a little bit earlier. There's a couple of reasons for that we heard during our stakeholder process. One is we heard a lot about congestion, alleys kind of getting plugged up earlier, foot traffic, a lot of safety issues. So when we talked with waste haulers, you know, there were certainly proposals that came into us that were as early as 3 a.m. start time. We didn't feel like that was reasonable. And so we landed on 6 o'clock because of what we heard about the safety, traffic issues, alleys, areas where there are schools, that can get a little bit sticky with kids coming into school and traffic there. And also, to be honest with you, this Waste No More ordinance that's coming online soon. I mean, 70% of Denver residents voted for that. Well, what that means is there's going to be more collection. There's going to be compost. There's going to be recycling. There's going to be trash. So we had to account for that too. So all of that factored into moving the time back from 7 a.m. to 6 a.m. The same would apply for the stamped video audible. That's not changing. It's just that the trash collection will be allowed starting at 6 a.m.
Let me
Go ahead.
I was going to interject one thing with regards to the time-stamped video. We need that time-stamped video of the trash truck actually, like, lifting the dumpster, emptying it. In other words, if it's just a picture of the truck, we can't, the hearing officers, et cetera, they aren't going to accept that. It could have been just cutting through the alley, and there's nothing illegal about that. So I just wanted to get that little extra bit in there. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead, Brendan.
No, Paul, I was going to see if you wanted to touch on the construction activities, because I assume,
Sure.
it's construction's happening everywhere in the city. So that's another one that's being proposed to be, the enforcement mechanism is being proposed to be changed.
Yeah, and so with construction, this kind of goes back to one of your other questions too. Gee, if it's happening right now, can we call somebody? Just one comment is that DPD does have authority with this ordinance. Now it's I'm sure way low priority for them, but the program was never set for 24/7 response. We excel in any sort of noise that's predictable or dependable with regards to when it's always, well, I guess it'd be predictable. When we know when it's going to happen, or the complainant can convey when it's going to happen, which then brings me to the construction issue. Currently, the construction is exempted Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturday, Sunday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Outside of those hours, they just are not allowed to exceed, say, for the most part, 50 decibels at residential property, which I'm talking more than twice as loud as 50 decibels right
Yeah.
now. But the problem is we actually have to have someone out there to measure the noise. And we do not excel in random or unpredictable noise sources. And what we have problems with construction is you've got one or two general contractors, depending upon how big the site is. And then they've got, like another 10 to 20 subs, and all of those subs have subs. And then all it takes is just one sub. They show up one time, they don't come back again, but somebody else's sub or a sub of a sub comes by, 2 days later, but then it's a week before somebody else shows up. There's just no way to predict that. So what we've proposed, and we've vetted it with the city attorney's office, we've proposed going to plainly audible, and outside of the exempted hours, if the noise is plainly audible and we're able to get a time-stamped video of that, just like the waste hauling situation, we would be able to cite on that evidence. Now, one other thing that we do is we always give one warning to a contractor or a waste hauler at the one site. That's one warning per whatever the site is. But if then the next time, they're right back at it, or a week later, or what have you, that warning's good for 1 year. So the next time that we get a complaint and we have the correct audio video evidence that we need time stamped, and then we just go ahead and we're able to cite them at that point. So it should vastly improve our ability to enforce on construction.
Can you define plainly audible versus this 50 decibel? And like you said, 50 decibel, I speak louder than that in the house. So
Exactly.
I know it's very low, but
no,
yeah.
That's a really good question. I'm sorry, I forgot to go there too. First off, we adopted the exact same definition that DPD has in their ordinances that involve sound. And so what it means basically is that the sound is audible, and you can hear it and you know what it is. It's identifiable. So in other words, oh, okay, that's a saw, that's a hammer. Somebody just dumped a load of rebar, that sort of thing. But if it's audible, but it's so inaudible that you can't tell what it is, then that wouldn't qualify.
Okay, and this is only for the construction activity portion of the ordinance with this audible. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Right. And that still allows a contractor, if they come quietly to the site, or they've passed the time, but they're inside the building and they're painting, or,
right,
drywalling, or that sort of stuff, because it's plainly audible at the complainant's property.
Right. That sounds
wherever
good.
that.
Yep. Thank you. Any questions?
I was just gonna say I can speak to festivals. I mean, I know you guys have the big Sunnyside Music Fest. I live on the other side of Federal. I've been a few times. The change here is bumping the allowable decibel limit from 80 to 85 if you have all the proper permits from the applicable city agencies. So you get a bump in the decibel limit. To my knowledge, we haven't ever had any complaints about Sunnyside Music Fest. So you're all doing something right, because if we don't get any complaints, then it doesn't we don't know it exists.
Yeah.
So
you know what?
Hasn't been any issues.
A once a year festival isn't what aggravates people. It's kind of that a business with bands, unpredictable, right? Anybody can excuse one big festival or, something with whatever frequency when they know this is happening. And I'm sure it's above 85 decibels. I can't imagine where the stage and the music is and the house is literally across the street that it wouldn't be above 85. I'd be surprised. but you're right. No one complains about that amenity in a sense.
Yep. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, your
Yeah,
neighbors seem to like it, so we don't want to get involved.
totally. So that's an easy one.
Yeah, I don't really know particularly if there's anything else that necessarily would apply. I mean, it seems like we touched on the pre-existing source premises, talked about the festivals, the construction activities, waste stream activities. Um, all of this stuff is posted on our website, and I saw you had it in the agenda. It's on there now. It's been on there. It will be on there until hopefully it gets passed from city council. Obviously, they have to vote on this.
Yeah.
We've done our work. We've presented to the safety committee last week. It's moved out of that, so it is on to the full council next week. It has to have two readings, and then they'll vote on it, and it'll pass or it won't. But this was a multiple years effort on our part. We did our best to try to strike a balance. I mean, the noise ordinance, the way that it's structured, um, is such that it never makes everyone happy all the time. It's just the space that we work in, and we understand that. But we did take every meeting that was requested of us and held public stakeholder engagement meetings, and we really tried to understand what the issues were, sent out a community noise survey. I know we got some stuff back from Sunnyside because I remember reading stuff about Sunnyside Music Festival and some of the answers. So this is our best shot after years at this to try to tweak the ordinance because it's 17 years old since the last time it went through this, and everybody knows how much Denver's changed in almost 2 decades, and there's just a lot more activity and competing interests now.
Well, thank you so much for coming here. And, I definitely learned something that I think is important and clarifying, especially about the commercial and industrial. That was new. The other stuff was, just changing and obviously there's recording in the activity. I think that might be an important thing. So as kind of share this information with folks who, may bring this up, it'll be, it'll be good to share that you've got to actually capture the activity of dumping. This kind of gets into, I didn't catch it, but my neighbor's camera caught it, because I have one angle and they have a different angle. There's going to be all those kinds of situations to try to, triangulate identifying that it actually occurred with one camera. So things I can share, we can share with our community to say, be aware that you have to do that. So that was definitely good. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to the next couple of things on our agenda? And I think we'll easily have enough time to cover those as well.
I would quickly add too, when you make a complaint to 311, it doesn't hurt to tell them that you would like to make a noise complaint to public health. Because once in a while they might route it to the wrong spot and
Okay.
that just disappears. But that's always helpful or to get it where it needs to go.
Okay. Mention DDPAG. All right, got it. Thank you very much. Guys, you're welcome to stay on or drop off. I'm sure you have better things to do on your Thursday evening. I appreciate your time very much.
I don't know if they're better, but
We'll let you to your meeting. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Hi, Melissa.
All right, so the next topic we have here is Sarah Kaplan. She's a resident in Sunnyside, and she brought to our attention some changes in RTD schedules, and specifically the 44th line that goes down 44th and down Tejon, and really impacts both Berkeley, Sunnyside, and Highlands, and into Lodo, probably Union Station area. So Sarah, I'm going to let you take this on, and I appreciate you bring this to our attention, and we'll mobilize the community as needed here.
Thanks, Troopty. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Kaplan. I'm a resident of Sunnyside and a frequent 44 rider. So RTD, as I've come to understand, reviews their schedule and their yeah, we'll just leave it at that. They review their schedule 3 times a year, and they make changes to the schedule that are generally in response to ridership or in response to volume, to either increase service, decrease service, predict or maintain predictability with schedule, all those good things. So for those of you that ride the 44, you likely may have noticed that the schedule timing changed and the service frequency has actually reduced pretty significantly within the standard commuting hours between 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., as well as the commuting home to our neighborhood hours between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. The route has also changed. The 44 used to connect through downtown and then up into Rhino and Five Points. Mm-hmm. And RTD actually decided to bifurcate our lines and create a new ART service line to connect RTD down to Broadway Station and to move folks within the 44. The start and stop of the 44, now the hub is Civic Center Station downtown. So it truly is a commuting line for folks that live in our neighborhood or live further west in Berkeley or even further towards Ward Station into Wheat Ridge, because it does terminate in Civic Center Station now. However, with the reduction in frequency during the commuting hours, what used to be an achievable opportunity to get on the 44 and be downtown in our city center by 8 a.m. is no longer an option. The reduction in schedule eliminated the 30-minute frequency for morning pickup, as well as the 30-minute frequency for evening pickup, and changed to a now hour differential between morning pickup and evening pickup, which RTD has mentioned is in response to either ridership or predictability or to maintain timeliness with scheduling. Now, in the little time, so this change went into effect for January 2025, mid around Martin Luther King holiday. In the little time that the schedule has been in place, I'm not sure if other folks in this land use team ride the bus. I ride the bus about 3 times a week to commute in and out of downtown. And I have experienced significant delays. I have experienced significant capacity issues. I have experienced accessibility issues where, due to capacity and volume, folks that need an accommodation on our bus cannot find safe seating. The bus is requiring more staging time at various spots to support folks trying to get on and off the bus safely. So in a lot of ways, how RTD had mentioned that these changes were to create more timeliness and to create more anticipated outcomes for how folks could utilize RTD and depend on RTD to commute in and out of downtown, that hasn't been realized. I have started to engage with our RTD communication and engagement team to discuss potential opportunities to host a neighborhood meeting where RTD could be present to hear some of our feedback or understand some of our concerns associated with how ridership may have been affected. I'm fully recognize I'm only one person riding the bus, but within my professional network, there are other folks that are reliant on the bus to be downtown and to be present downtown by a certain time of day, and that's not achievable now. I know one of our mayor's initiatives and our citywide goals is to support and maintain a vibrant Denver, and especially with a lot of the interest in what is going on in downtown Denver right now, and really to activate upper downtown. There is this reliance on our public means of transportation to bring our community members or our community residents that work in downtown safely into downtown and out of downtown, and not rely on cars or not rely on single occupancy vehicles. So in these conversations with RTD, they have been open, they have been responsive, they have been interesting in listening to us and working with us to understand how ridership may have been affected with these changes to the RTD line. But what's uniquely timed and what's very interesting is, Trupti, earlier tonight, I did receive an email from RTD and the community engagement team that more or less states that due to interest or due to concerns that have been raised associated with the changes to the RTD line, RTD has included service increase for the 44 as part of their May 25 potential. But they did preface that with, hey, we're in the servicing development period. We're trying to solicit community feedback. There is a survey and a link that is open that RTD is accepting public comment and public feedback now until March 6th. And it's not just the 44, right? These are all lines, rail, bus, all lines, as they're trying to plan for their May 2025 service changes. They're trying to solicit some feedback from their ridership to understand if these changes are in line. What's interesting too, if there is a community conversation with our neighboring RNOs, the 38 is also on the list for potential service changes. It would be solely a schedule change. It doesn't mention service decrease or service increase. But so I would definitely encourage folks that use the 38 as well, that is on the docket for this public period for comment through RTD's website. You can click an easy link. You can review all of the potential changes that are slated for May 2025, and you can provide their feedback. And so what's actually pretty exciting is that some of the changes they are considering for the 44 is a pretty quick pivot from what they put in place in January. They are suggesting increasing 2 additional half-hour incremental pickups in the morning between, so right now there is a 6:30 departure from Ward Station and a 7:30 departure from Ward Station. They are suggesting including a 7 a.m. departure from Ward Station and an 8 a.m. departure from Ward Station, which would bring that bus into our neighborhood around 7:30 a.m. or 8 a.m. Once that timing goes forward on the line, right? Because 7 and 8, yeah, something like that. So basically it's bringing in, and I can go over the specifics if anyone truly cares, but it's bringing back 30-minute increments in the morning, as well as 30-minute increments in the evening to leave from Civic Center Station. They would be increasing the service, which right now is the departure is 5:39 and 6:39. They would be including a 5:10 departure and a 6:10 departure. There are also, and I will stop after this last share because I know I've been talking for quite a minute, as part of this feedback session where RTD is trying to engage the public and trying to understand, hey, are these changes we want to implement? They are also hosting a Ask the Planner night on March 4th, where folks can attend a virtual session and talk to members of the RTD planning team. I'm assuming it is in more of a moderated question and answer format in which you submit an answer and then someone gets it and RTD responds. Anyways, there is an upcoming Q&A forum on March 4th where you can speak to members of RTD. So while, to go back to where this whole thing started with a community meeting or a community information meeting that RTD would be happy to attend, if that's not an option, or if that just becomes too cumbersome to try and schedule across our 3 neighborhoods, at the very least, I did think it important to broadcast that RTD is considering service increases on the 44, and there is the Ask the Planner night on March 4th that I would encourage members of the community to attend. And that's it for me from now.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And Sarah, if you can get those 2 links for both of these to us, and we can just start socializing it. And I think the issue is that by the time our newsletter goes out, this is happening 2 days after, 3 days after.
Yeah.
So even though we'll stick it in there, I think whatever push to get the awareness out, we really need to do it now through our either word of mouth, social media. And since Lexi also is on the Highlands United Land Use Committee, Lexi, what's your thought on being able to get this onto their platforms? I mean, I talked to Lisa, but when I was talking to Lisa, we were talking specifically that if we have a neighborhood-wide meeting with RTD present, would Lisa, send this out. It just sounds like right now the first step is just going to be getting these two sessions out. And if that is sufficient to make some of those changes for
Yeah.
May, we don't need a bigger conversation. But really just to get that information out. And, I don't commute, but, I believe what you're saying. If what you're saying is correct about delay, accessibility, capacity, I think you should take some pictures, you know, in the next few days between now and May or when they make those decisions, because I think that to me, that's enough to know that they might have just got it wrong, So you got my support, even though I don't use it for commuting, I would be supportive of folks who do, who now have to deal with this. So, Lexi,
Yeah.
any thought on how to get this information out broadly in Highlands outside of, I guess the newsletter or social media?
Yeah, I can, if you want to send me the links when you get them, or I can send them along to Tim. And then there's a new, she's been actively involved. She's not on the committee, but she's joining all the meetings, and she does a lot with CDOT, and has been really involved. And she rides she commutes, and so she's had a whole complaint on I think it's the 31 bus on Federal. So yeah,
Okay.
I think she would be a good resource too. If you want to loop me in, I
Okay.
can pass that along.
Great, great. And there is definitely a transportation individual in Berkeley, and you may know her, you may have seen her, Alexi, in some, 38th Avenue or other planning. I can't remember her name. It might be Alessandra, but she
Mm.
is also very active on pedestrian and community, I'm sorry, transportation pieces. So in terms of maybe her network that she has over there, who is also interested in this space, we want to make sure we maybe get this stuff to these groups to share and to socialize. So, Sarah, send that stuff to me as soon as you can, and I'll get it out to those two groups. I
So
think it's
Melissa,
Alessandra Castaneda or something, if anybody
yeah,
hears that name. Yeah.
Should send it
Melissa's
along.
saying yes.
Melissa's been on it. So she's already put the link in the chat to the proposed May 25 changes. And you can click on you can click basically on as many as routes as you'd like to comment on. And public comment is being received on those changes until March 6th. And then she also, in addition to the Ask a Planner session on March 4th, which she did put in the chat, she also dropped some additional virtual public meeting links, one for March 3rd in the morning, or sorry, at noon, and then one for March 3rd at 5:30 as well. So there is beaucoup opportunity that if folks want to engage or be part of the conversation about the RTD strategies that impact our neighborhoods, multiple opportunities to get your voice heard or get out there, or yeah, even just ask a planner to understand what's been going on with RTD and why these changes were put in place to begin with.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Let's get the word out on this and, talk to all of our transportation interested folks. So thank you very much. And hopefully good luck that we get some of the changes that benefit our community, especially commuters. All right. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch with
Thanks,
that
Tripti.
stuff. Thank you. And then lastly, and we made good, I think we made good time, even though I was hoping we would be done sooner. We've got Matthew Elliott, who's joining SUNI as a land use committee with a very specific area of interest on street safety. And so I wanted to introduce him to this group and give an opportunity to talk about why. And then obviously our group can be thinking about how. And, one of the things I'm going to do in the next, month or two is really get the 6, 7 people who have now shown interest in doing things, whether it's parks, it's transportation, and kind of strategizing outside of these meetings about, okay, how do we start, how do we start mobilizing on the various areas and have some responsibility and kind of some deadlines and projects to go after. So Matthew, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, what you're interested in and why.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Yeah, my name's Matthew Elliott. I've been living in Sunnyside for almost 15 years now, and just recently realized this organization existed and was something I should get involved with. So um, there we go. But yeah, I think the thing that has kind of led me to my passion about street safety is that I became a full-time bikeist about 5 years ago. I gave up my car and I go everywhere on bike. I've got two little boys, one in middle school now and one in elementary school. So we're biking to and from school every single day. And I think that experience has kind of led me to realize the dangers of the street infrastructure that we have in place right now. So kind of looking for opportunities of where I can do things to help make it safer for our kids to get to school. I think especially this past school year, we've had two middle schoolers hit by cars along 41st Avenue, which is supposed to be one of our neighborhood bikeways. One at Federal, one all the way over in Lowell, which isn't really in Sunny's perspective, but is still along that 41st Avenue bikeway. So I think a couple of those have really kind of encouraged me to try to see what I can do to help make a difference. I think at this point, just trying to get a sense for how the organization works and what types of things we can work on, and definitely excited to think about what some of these different actionable projects might be.
Thank you. And Melissa, if you're aware of things going on, I told him I would connect him with Elizabeth Morales of Dottie that works on some of his pieces. We can go for grants. We can be, getting people together, bringing awareness. I know one of the intersections, Matthew, and when we spoke on the phone before this, he was talking about the federal. And then now that like we were just talking about the whole federal and the BRT potentially at risk, you know, I guess, while we have a little bit of time, what are the alternatives, right? Because one was, hey, there's stuff happening. We could be talking about how to include safety into ongoing projects, but assuming that is, tabled, what do we do instead? How do we work through Dottie at this point? And, so yeah, if any thoughts on this conversation, and I know Alexi's got her hand up. So I know federal and 26 had some improvements made. So Lexi, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I care. I know that the Jefferson business was somewhat involved, but I guess Melissa, I don't really know the origin of the 25th, where it's 25th is the crossing there with all the stuff going on, and that just came to mind. So yeah, that was kind of
And
what
I
I
thought
was
it was a
thinking.
26 as well. I thought 26 and federal was safety improvements, and the 25th and federal was,
Pedestrian.
yeah. So Melissa,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm really trying to figure out like what can we do if we have a similar issue, and maybe why wasn't 41st and federal maybe even brought up in the high injury, network situation, or is it right below the threshold? Melissa, if you could share a little bit about.
So the big thing is that any type of project that you see like that is usually a bond, right? These are very expensive. That had a hawk signal, so that wonderful thing that looks like a stoplight that is solely for the use of pedestrians and people with alternate means of transportation, is an incredibly expensive piece of equipment. I don't even know what it'd be up to now, but probably about 5 or 6 years ago, they were about $500,000 a piece. So they are very, very expensive. We did a lot of sidewalk improvements, concrete improvements around there. It was a very expensive project. But the good news is that I'm not sure if you saw, but the mayor has announced that we will be seeking another bond. So this will be a shorter bond. Most of our bonds are 10 years, and this one's a little shorter. I'm going to drop a link to the chat. So they are seeking Denver Rights feedback right now on this, just looking for projects that you feel are important and in need of bond funding. This would be something that you may want to consider. So the 25th and Federal was connected with the Business Improvement District there. Obviously, you don't have one of those. That doesn't mean you can't request, infrastructure changes or improvements. But that's how that one was run through, which will ultimately allow it to be upkept and the like. But yeah, so I really encourage everyone to share your feedback through the link I just shared. That will be incredibly important. The councilwoman has noted how little money has been spent on the west side of Denver in prior bonds. And so she's really hoping for a more equitable outcome. And we're really hoping to see more projects, more money being funded equally throughout the city, including in the west side of Denver and northwest Denver.
And actually, that topic is something I was planning on putting on for next month, to have a larger, broader discussion. One of the pieces is like really evaluating, at least for Sunnyside specifically, when were funds last used from a bond in Sunnyside, and then kind of work with that, that core seven folk committee that are, because we have folks thinking about parks, and Chaffee Park could be another one of those things that potentially, and I didn't know whether safety was included in this vibrant Denver versus I saw things like parks and rec centers and some other pieces, but safety is also something that they would be looking at into for this vibrant Denver piece.
Yeah, they're looking for a wide range. Like, how do you think that we can improve Denver? So, they really are looking for all the feedback. It'll then be distilled and sorted. So, let them do the work, but enter in all of your ideas. We'd rather have more than less.
Is there a deadline on the survey? When are they collecting until? Because I did notice in the article that was written that city council by sometime late summer, midsummer is supposed to come up with a list of projects to share with the mayor. I saw that in the article, so I was wondering if there's a timeline in which we should really be mobilizing on.
So you're going to want to take this survey by the end of March. So it closes March 31st. So city council doesn't distill that. That's going to be the mayor. But what council is doing is they're creating, they have a working group that they have formed, and they're going to be sorting through and creating so the same thing that we did with the last bond, having a Parks and Rec one to talk about the different Parks and Rec projects that are being proposed. So once we get them into appropriate buckets, then we can kind of start that process. There'll be a council member appointed to, most likely, I mean, we don't have full understanding of how we're going to do this, but most likely a council member would be appointed to a committee. So Council President Sandoval would likely do the appointing and assign people to different committees. And they would help distill down those ideas, see, what the costs are. Are they shovel ready? The mayor has been very clear. He's looking for shovel ready projects. This is a short 6-year bond. So you have 6 years to spend those projects. So things that are going to need extensive processes to, design and conceptualize likely aren't what we're looking for right now.
But a 2 to 3 year kind of a design implementation is reasonable. I mean,
it would have to. So we don't get to choose. Not even council does. So there's a bond executive committee, and they decide the tranches that the money will be dished out in, and what projects will be done in that tranche. So even then, you don't get to decide when it would happen. We just have to expend that money within 6 years. So, but yeah, we're really looking to see how we can improve Denver, and we'd love that feedback.
And so I actually filled out the survey as soon as I saw it this morning, and probably submitted 15 different ideas for 41st and Federal. Is that useful feedback, like a long bulleted list of stuff, or is it better to put together like a more formal proposal of what to do with an intersection?
We'd accept both, right? But the reality is, and keep in mind that Federal is not a city road, okay? That's a state highway. So we have only a limited amount of things that we can do without getting the state involved and getting approvals. So keeping that in mind, things that would never, ever fly, no different than BRT. We're not taking away a lane of traffic on Federal. It's not going to happen. They tried that with BRT and was told flat no. So being realistic in those kind of asks, I think would be helpful, although not necessary. I mean, you can submit anything you'd like. Just knowing that, we're going to be looking at shovel-ready projects, possible projects, and the ones that are going to be the most impactful to a broader community. And with a huge eye to equity, I do want to say that. So especially when you're looking at, alternative means of transportation, so these bikeways and the like, you are really reaching people that choose to have no car maybe such as yourself, I'm not sure, and
Yep.
people that have no choice, right? Because there are people that simply cannot afford to drive. And so making sure that, you're expressing how your proposals meet that equity lens, I think would be very helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else with any comments or
Where would
questions?
I find that survey? Because I'd like to take that survey.
Pete, I just added a link to the chat.
Okay,
Let me
great.
know if
Thank
you can't see it, and I always send you an email.
I'm saving this chat, assuming I know where to find it. But what I will do is follow up with this. One of the things I've been trying to figure out how timing on is to have a land use specific newsletter, but that it doesn't coincide with the other newsletter. But we do have a lot of this kind of activity and things and meetings that it's just hard to put all of it in one place in our monthly newsletter. It kind of gets lost. So I'm hoping to start a second monthly newsletter specific to land use items. So all of these links are kind of perfect to go in there. And I do think that the vibrant Denver bond situation is a topic this group should kind of take on for the next few months and really kind of get people together thinking about how do we collect input, how do we put numbers, to ideas and then share that. I feel like I need to know a little bit more about what's actually possible, what's not possible in terms of shovel ready. I can't think of anything right now in Sunnyside that's shovel ready. So,
The bridge,
huh?
the
The bridge.
bridge
Okay,
connecting
that is
Global.
not, I mean, the bridge isn't, that's not is that a bond project that this would pay for? That
I,
I don't know if that would be
who
part of it.
knows? Who
He's talking
knows?
about the bridge from Fox Park.
Right.
Melissa, I
Just
don't think,
connecting the neighborhoods. I mean, it would help, but you know,
Melissa, do
that's
you
I
all
have,
just
oh,
posted some information on what kind of projects are eligible.
okay.
okay. Oh,
So
great.
must be ready to construct quickly, be part of a city-owned asset, which is city park, recreation center, street, library, serve a public purpose, and have an expected useful life of at least 10 years.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Okay, that is good stuff.
That's great.
Yeah, and so I want to, just let you guys know, I think, this sometimes we have topics and, they kind of take up the whole time. We may want to meet for coffee and refreshments outside to think as a neighborhood, as a committee, and we've got different people now who want to own different projects, and we have possible money coming down that we can work around. So keep a lookout. I'm hoping to get us all together outside of this thing to kind of strategize about what do we pursue as the land use committee in Sunnyside for 2025, and something like this is kind of a perfect place for us to think about what to pursue through the neighborhood. So keep a lookout for that and our new newsletter. And otherwise, I think we are all done. If nobody else has any questions, I want to thank everyone for joining and participating. And I will get this and last month up on our YouTube channel soon and then put it out for the public. Thank you on the RTD stuff as well. We'll get all that information out.
Thank you, Trupti. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, Trupti.
Thank
Yeah,
you, everyone.
thanks
Happy
everyone.
Sarah.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a good rest of your month.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks. Bye.